They used my money to go on a dream vacation and didn't even invite me. I paid $26,000 for a luxury Dubai trip, thinking it would bring our broken family together. But days before departure, my dad called to say I'd been replaced. "Your sister's husband deserves this more," he said. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. They went without me. No apology, no refund, just silence. That was the moment I realized I wasn't family. I was a wallet. And that wallet was about to close, for good. I'd spent weeks comparing resorts, adjusting flight schedules, and calling concierge desks just to make sure every single detail was perfect. This trip to Dubai wasn't just a vacation, it was my peace offering, a desperate attempt to stitch back together the unraveling seams of my family. I thought, maybe if we were far enough away from our old habits, old grudges, old expectations, maybe we could start over. The total came to $26,000. I paid it in one transaction. No installment plans, no hesitation, just one long calculated breath and a single click. Confirm. It was for Dad's 65th birthday. I'd even planned a surprise dinner in the desert, camels, stars, a private chef. Mom would love it. My sister, Clara, had just had her second baby, and I thought she deserves a break. Her husband, Nick, was always awkward around us, but maybe a 5-star hotel might melt his ice. And me, I wanted to feel like we were still something that resembled a family. For most of my life, I was the one who didn't need much. I was the easy one, the one who didn't complain, who stayed quiet when Mom snapped, who covered for Clara when she forgot birthdays, who gave Dad a ride home when he had one too many at company dinners. And I never asked for anything in return. Not because I didn't want anything, but because I knew no one would offer. The tickets arrived in my inbox. I skimmed through the passenger list, smiling as I saw my name printed next to Get First Class. It felt like a reward, even if I was the one paying for it. Then, 2 days later, I got a message from Mom. "Sweetheart, your father wants to talk. There's a change in plans." I blinked at the screen. "A change? What change?" She added, "He thinks it might be best if Nick goes instead of you. It's more efficient. One less seat to waste, since Clara needs a +1. I called immediately. No answer. I tried again. Finally, Dad picked up. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said, his voice too cheerful. "Look, about the trip, don't get worked up, okay? It's just logistics." "Logistics?" I asked, voice flat. "Nick's never traveled internationally, and it'll be good for him. You know, brother-in-law bonding. Plus, Clara needs support. I planned this, I paid for this. And you'll still be part of it, in spirit." That was the moment my stomach dropped. It wasn't just a change of plans. It was a decision, one they had made without me, one they never intended to explain, only deliver. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I said, "Okay," and hung up. The next morning, I drove them to the airport. Clara didn't look at me as she loaded her oversized Louis Vuitton luggage into my trunk. Nick gave me a nod, the same smug one he always used when he wanted to seem polite, but didn't care. Mom hugged me stiffly, the kind of hug that lands more like a pat. Dad clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a real trooper, Mandy." They walked into the terminal without looking back. And I stood there, outside departures, watching the automatic doors slide shut. A kid ran by with a toy plane, laughing. Somewhere inside, the intercom buzzed to life with boarding instructions. And there I was, alone, gripping my steering wheel, thinking I paid for their escape. but maybe this was mine. On the drive home, I tried to convince myself maybe this was love. Maybe love meant sacrificing without recognition. Maybe I did this because I cared. Maybe I was the bigger person. Maybe that was enough. But somewhere between exit 14 and 15, a new thought entered my mind. Quiet at first, then deafening. They didn't forget me. They excluded me. And not one of them said thank you. 3 days after they left for Dubai, I stopped by my parents' house to water Mom's orchids. She'd asked me to, almost as if nothing strange had happened. As if being removed from the trip I funded was a scheduling mishap. As if I wasn't burning inside every time I saw a new photo pop up on Clara's Instagram. Their happy faces lit with desert sunlight and fake smiles. I needed to forward something from my old email account, one that was still logged in on Mom's ancient laptop. The house was quiet. I settled at the kitchen counter, sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting for the inbox to load. But before I could reach my account, a chat window caught my eye. Group name, Ray Family Without Drama. That name alone made me freeze. There were messages from Dad, Clara, Nick, Mom, and even my younger brother Jason. I knew I shouldn't click, but I did. The first message was from Clara. Mandy won't even notice she's not going. She probably thinks this is still her little charity project. Nick replied with a laughing emoji. She loves being useful. That's her thing, right? Like a walking wallet. Mom added, poor girl thinks giving money means she's part of something. Sad, really. Jason wrote, well, she's the single one. No kids, no man. She needs to feel important somehow. And Dad chimed in, let her play philanthropist. It keeps her off our backs. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, as if all the air had been replaced with cement. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling. A walking wallet. Useful, lonely. They hadn't just excluded me. They dehumanized me. And have you ever read something about yourself you weren't meant to see? That shattered a version of love you held on to? What did you do after? I closed the window, sat back, stared at the refrigerator like it had answers. And then I laughed, quiet, bitter, almost choking on it. So this was who I was to them. Not a daughter, not a sister. Just an account balance. A memory surfaced. I was 17. I had just been accepted to a top university abroad. Full scholarship. Everything I had dreamed of. I remember showing the letter to Mom, beaming, already picturing my life in London. She cried, not happy tears, no. She collapsed into herself, shaking her head. Who will take care of your brother while I'm working? Your dad's barely home. Clara's busy. You're the only one we can count on. That night, I withdrew my acceptance, and no one ever brought it up again. I gave up the biggest opportunity of my life for them, because I thought love meant sacrifice, and I believed if I gave enough, eventually I'd feel full. But I never did. And they never noticed. Back in the present, my phone buzzed. Jason. Hey sis, he said when I picked up. Quick thing, Mom said you might help me out with this credit card issue. It's under her name, but kinda yours? What do you mean mine? I asked. I mean, you've used it before. She said you wouldn't mind covering it this month. I stared at the laptop screen, still open. How much? Only like maybe $200. Nothing major. You're good for it, right? I almost replied like I always did. Sure, no problem. But something shifted. I looked again at that group chat. Wallet, useful, sad. I said, Jason, I don't think I can help this time. A pause, then a scoff. Wow, okay, thanks a lot. He hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't apologize. I just sat there in that too-quiet house, surrounded by souvenirs of a family that never saw me as real, only reliable. And I realized something I should have seen years ago. I never owed them anything. Not my money, not my time, not my silence. I spent the next morning sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, laptop in front of me, coffee gone cold beside a pile of unopened bank statements. I wasn't angry anymore. That stage had passed. I wasn't even surprised. Now I was focused, calm, like someone tracing the origin of a leak before the ceiling caves in. I logged into my oldest bank account, the one Mom had helped me open in college. I hadn't checked it in years. My income now went to a different institution, one I kept private. But this old one, it was still linked to her name. Page after page of transaction history loaded on the screen. At first, it was petty. Streaming subscriptions I never used, monthly donations to charities I hadn't heard of. But then I saw it, small payments to a loan agency, recurring monthly for 4 years. The account number wasn't mine. I opened a separate tab and began cross-referencing the numbers with emails. Then I saw it, a credit card opened in 2016 under my name, with an address matching my parents' home. I'd never applied for that card. I clicked through statement after statement, clothes, home decor, vacation packages, all paid off slowly through minimum payments, using my identity, my credit, my name. A line appeared toward the bottom of 1 month's statement. Withdrawal IRA account $7,800. I froze. That was my retirement account. I logged in to the investment portal, 1 withdrawal, 1 date, exactly 3 weeks before Nick's 30th birthday. I didn't want to believe it, but I'd seen the photos. Clara had thrown him a surprise party that month, complete with a catered dinner and a rented yacht. I thought it was a gift from Dad. It was a gift from me. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. I couldn't unsee what I'd just seen. And worse, I knew I'd barely scratched the surface. I needed help. I hadn't spoken to Michael in years. We dated briefly in college before realizing we were better as friends. Last I heard, he was doing financial law in Manhattan. I found him through LinkedIn, sent a brief message. He replied within an hour, "Still got your back, come in tomorrow." His office was cold, sleek, nothing like his messy dorm room from our past. He offered me tea, but I waved it off and pulled out my printouts. He reviewed them silently, jaw tightening with every page. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady but sharp. "Amanda, this is identity theft, fraud, misuse of funds. We're not talking about family squabbles anymore. We're talking about crimes." I exhaled, shaky. I wanted to be wrong. "You're not." We went over next steps, reporting to the credit bureaus, freezing certain accounts, gathering admissible evidence. He gave me a list of actions to take, a roadmap for a legal case if I wanted one. "I've seen this before," he said quietly, "but it's always hardest when it's family." On the way home, my phone rang. Caller ID, Grandma Helen. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She lived 2 states away, usually quiet, unless there was a holiday or funeral. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling, "can we talk privately?" She didn't want to say anything over the phone. She asked to meet in person. The next day, I drove 3 hours to her small yellow cottage, nestled between overgrown hedges. She opened the door and pulled me into a long, tight hug. We sat in her kitchen. She poured tea. It smelled like cinnamon and cloves. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "Your mother, She did something similar to me once, years ago. I stared at her. She nodded. She borrowed from me, said it was for medical bills. It wasn't. I found out later. It went to a down payment for her friend's boutique. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was ashamed, and because no one believed me when I tried. She reached across the table and took my hand. You're not crazy, Amanda. You're not ungrateful. You're not dramatic. You're just the first one brave enough to say it out loud. Tears spilled before I could stop them. We sat in silence for a long time, hands still clasped, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt seen. The invitation arrived exactly 3 weeks after the audit, a cream envelope, gold trim, perfect calligraphy. Celebrating 40 years of love, a tribute to Robert and Janice Ray. A backyard garden party, open bar, string quartet, cocktail attire. I stared at the RSVP card for a full minute. Then I slipped it into my desk drawer and began planning. Not for the party, but for something else. I'd spent enough years staying quiet, enough years being the good one, the fixer, the peacemaker. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd taken my trust, my voice, and twisted it into silence. But not anymore. I spent days building it, slide by slide, line by line, transaction by transaction, each receipt, each email, each bank statement. I layered the evidence like a prosecutor, the dates of withdrawals, the credit card statements with purchases made, at boutiques I'd never entered, the $7,800 missing from my retirement account, the IP addresses confirming login locations from their house, not mine. And at the end, screenshots of the group chat, the insults, the jokes, and finally, the audio. I edited nothing. I let it speak for itself. The night of the party, I wore black. Not because I was mourning, though in some ways I was, but because it made me feel grounded, solid, untouchable. They'd set up the backyard with white tents and fairy lights. A jazz band played softly in the corner. Waiters passed champagne flutes. Everyone looked beautiful, polished, fake. Clara waved when she saw me. "You came," she chirped, almost surprised. I smiled tightly. Wouldn't miss it. Mom kissed my cheek as if we hadn't spoken in weeks. "We're so glad you're here, sweetheart. Just try to keep things smooth, okay?" Smooth. Of course. I waited until the music paused, until everyone had a drink in hand and their attention turned toward the small stage where Dad stood, clearing his throat. He began his speech, a sentimental ode to 40 years of love, loyalty, and family. People clapped. Mom dabbed at her eyes. Clara pretended to be touched. Then I stepped forward. "Can I say something?" The room shifted. A murmur. Dad blinked. "Amanda, sure, but—" "I'll keep it short," I said, walking up to the mic. I plugged in a USB. The projector behind me flickered to life. Slide 1. A photo of our family, smiling on a beach, the year I paid for that vacation without anyone knowing. Slide 2. A spreadsheet, line by line. $500 for Dad's dental work, $1,200 for Claire's emergency fund, $3,600 for Mom's kitchen remodel, $7,800 withdrawal, marked with a red box. Slide 3. Screenshots, group chat, letter play philanthropist. She thinks giving money makes her part of something. Slide 4. A close-up of Mom's text. Sad, really. The room was silent. Then came the audio. Dad's voice, crackling from a voice memo I'd saved on my phone. "She doesn't have a real family. She has money. Use it." Gasps. One woman dropped her drink. Someone whispered, "Did he really say that?" I turned off the projector. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply said, For years, I gave because I thought it meant love. I see now it meant convenience. I'm done being convenient. And then I walked off the stage. Behind me, the chaos began. Mom's voice rose first. "What the hell is wrong with you? You ruin our anniversary. For what? Revenge?" Clara tried to calm her. Dad stood frozen, glass in hand. I didn't look back. I walked straight to the exit. As I reached the front gate, a voice stopped me. "Aunt Amanda?" I turned. It was Ava, Clara's teenage daughter. She held her phone close to her chest. "I recorded it," she said. "The whole thing." I blinked. She nodded. "They've been lying to you forever. I always thought it was wrong, but no one listened." I smiled for real. "Thank you. Can I post it?" "Do whatever feels right." I left the house. Thunder rolled above. Rain began to fall. Not hard, just steady. Cleansing. I didn't run. I didn't cover my head. I let it soak in. In the quiet of my car, windows fogged with breath, I felt something shift. Not power, not victory, just peace. The kind that comes from saying the thing you've swallowed for years. The kind that follows truth. The party was over, literally and metaphorically. I expected silence, maybe a few cold texts, maybe a long accusatory email from Mom. But I didn't expect the first call to come from the bank. "Ms. Ray," the voice on the other end said, clipped but polite, "we're contacting you regarding irregular activity linked to a joint account associated with your name. We've begun a fraud investigation." They asked questions I already knew the answers to. Had I authorized recurring loan payments, opened a credit card in 2016, withdrawn $7,100 from an IRA tied to my Social Security number? No, and absolutely not. The woman sighed. "We'll be moving forward with formal documentation. You'll receive copies for your records. You may want to consult with legal counsel." By the end of the call, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sharp clarity of consequence. It was no longer about feelings or betrayal or messy family tension. It was real now, traceable, punishable. A week later, Mom's credit rating was flagged. Her bank froze 2 of her accounts. The boutique she'd been helping fund, quietly behind Dad's back, was temporarily shuttered due to pending legal complications. Dad? He got a formal letter from his pension administrator. Unauthorized withdrawals would be reviewed. He lost power of attorney over the family trust. That trust was, ironically, mostly mine. Clara's husband, Nick, wasn't spared. The IRS contacted him about undeclared earnings. Apparently, his little side hustle driving Uber Lux with Amanda's Tesla, yes, the car I once lent him for emergencies, hadn't been reported for 2 fiscal years. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. I watched all of it unfold like someone flipping through a distant stranger's story. Headlines with familiar names, numbers on paper that once belonged to me. A world I'd always carried on my back, finally shifting without my weight. Then came the article. It wasn't mine. A parenting blog, ironically, picked up Ava's video and posted a write-up titled, "The Daughter Who Paid and Then Spoke." It went viral, millions of views, thousands of shares. And in the comments section, a chorus began to rise. "I'm her, I'm Amanda." I sent this to my sister. She still thinks I owe her. This is what happens when the easy child wakes up. My inbox flooded, some angry, some grateful, some heartbroken. A woman in Boston wrote, "You gave me the courage to say no to my father for the first time in my life." A man from Toronto messaged, "They used me the same way. You made me feel seen." I never intended to go public, but the story had become bigger than me. Still, part of me waited for the other shoe to drop, and it did. Late one night, I got a voice message from Clara. It was 3 minutes long. Her voice cracked from the very first word. "Mandy, I don't even know how to start. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of it to go that far. I was scared. They always pushed you forward, and I felt like the broken one. When you started succeeding, I thought, maybe if I stayed quiet, I'd at least get something. I didn't want to hurt you, I swear." She sniffled. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. "They manipulated me, too. Dad, he made it sound like you didn't care, that you wanted to control everyone. And Mom, she always said you owed us for being the one who never gave her trouble." A pause. "I watched the video. I didn't know Ava recorded it. I thought you'd protect us, that you'd stay quiet like always." Another pause, and then, "I'm sending this from Dubai, Nick and I. We flew back here. I know it sounds crazy, but I just needed to get away from the noise." She let out a tired laugh. "Maybe I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I hear you now." The message ended. I stared at the screen for a long time. Dubai, again, after everything, after the lies, the theft, the exposed truth. They were still vacationing while the wreckage burned behind them. And yet, I didn't feel rage, not anymore. Just a deep ache for the years I'd spent hoping for something that was never coming. And if it were you, if the person who helped break you suddenly claimed to be broken too, would you answer? I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because silence finally was mine to choose. 6 months later, I stood on the front porch of a small craftsman house in Portland, watching the rain slip off the edges of the awning. The neighborhood smelled like pine and damp earth. I hadn't known what peace looked like until I saw fog settle over rooftops at sunrise. I hadn't told anyone I was moving except Grandma Helen. "You're not running," she told me. "You're resetting." I smiled when she said it. I smile every time I remember it now. In Portland, I walked more, talked less. I went to therapy twice a week, the kind where you don't just talk about what happened, but how you let it shape you. I learned what boundaries actually meant. Not walls, not revenge, but quiet, deliberate distance. I changed my number, blocked most of my family. My email filtered anything with their names straight to archive. Only Grandma could reach me. I kept her letters in a wooden box by my bed, handwritten, always with a pressed flower tucked inside. Sometimes she didn't say much, just told me the birds that visited her window, or what she was baking. But those letters felt like reminders. Someone still loved me without a transaction attached. One afternoon, I was volunteering at a local community center, helping children paint self-portraits. A little girl with thick curls and wide eyes looked up at me, paint on her nose. "Do you have a family?" she asked. I paused, then I smiled. "I do now." She nodded like it made perfect sense and went back to coloring in the sun behind her head. I didn't need to explain, to her or anyone else. I was still Amanda, still a daughter, still a sister in name. But for the first time, those titles didn't come with chains. I started writing again. Journals turned into blog posts turned into something bigger. People had kept messaging me after the video went viral. Daughters, sons, caregivers. People who had been used, erased, overlooked. So I started something called the Unseen Daughters Project. It wasn't flashy, just a website, a hotline, a directory of therapists and financial counselors. But it became a lighthouse. We held monthly support circles online, shared stories anonymously, offered grants for women trying to break free from financially or emotionally abusive family dynamics. We printed shirts that said, "No is a complete sentence." At our first in-person event, I stood behind a folding table, passing out name tags. There were 60 of us. Some cried the moment they walked in. Some laughed nervously, whispering, "This is the first time I've said it out loud." At the end of the night, as I was packing up leftover snacks, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a low bun. She carried a small velvet box. "I was close with your grandmother," she said softly. "We used to work at the library together." My heart fluttered. She told me to hold on to this, that when the time was right, I'd know. She placed the box in my hands. Inside was a ring, simple, gold, a delicate engraving on the inside band. "Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes." Tears stung my eyes. "She said it belonged to her grandmother," the woman added. "She wanted it to go to the girl who broke the silence." I nodded, speechless. That night, I sat alone in my small kitchen, tea cooling in my hands, staring at the ring. It fit perfectly, not because of size, but because of story. I turned on my webcam, looked into the lens, took a deep breath, and said, "My name is Amanda Ray, and I used to think being quiet made me good. That sacrifice meant love. That family meant never saying no." I paused, but I was wrong. I held up the ring. This belonged to a woman who was silenced, and now it belongs to someone who refused to be. Another pause, a beat of stillness. Then I leaned closer and asked, "And what about you? Are you ready to claim your truth?" The camera blinked, and I smiled.